Most internet theories are wrong, and that's okay. On my channel you'll find a load of videos that I like to call my theory videos, and they're some of the most popular things I've ever made. I usually begin these videos by making a bold statement and then spend the rest of the video trying to convince you that the statement is correct using as much evidence as I can find. People love this kind of stuff, and I should know. I spent a good chunk of my early years on this platform watching theory videos. The Game Theorists were my absolute favourite channel for a time, and although I haven't watched their videos for years, their classic theories have had a massive influence on me. Not just in shaping my interests and the kind of content I enjoy nowadays, but also in shaping the videos that I make. I'm sure that MatPat's influence is pretty clear across these videos of mine. Even today, The Real Gyms is one of my favourite channels, and he absolutely exploded in popularity when he started exploring Simpsons mysteries and providing explanations for them. And I would argue that they are some of his best videos. And again, I'm sure his influence on my videos is somewhat apparent. These two channels are far from being alone in the content they make. They've helped shape the taste of an entire generation of YouTube goers who love these kinds of videos as much as I do. So it is with love that I say that most of these theories are wrong, but that's okay. And to explain why, we're going to have to talk a little bit about inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. And yeah, that sounds a little bit complicated, so hold on tight as I try and explain exactly what these words mean. Science is, among other things, a method. The scientific method. A question is asked about the world, and a hypothetical answer is presented. That is called the hypothesis. Through experimentation and data analysis, that answer can either be proven wrong or it can be supported. Through the sharing of data and repeated testing, we can scrutinize and develop our explanations until they are the most accurate explanations of the world our current methodology can provide. This is called deduction, and it is what makes science so good. Science seeks to disprove itself. If a theory turns out to be bad, then we throw it out or at least modify it until it's shown to be a better explanation. But if a theory stands for hundreds of years, gets constantly supported with new methodology, fits neatly within new understanding, or can be measurably proven beyond a reasonable doubt, then we've got a pretty good theory on our hands. So if that's deduction, what is induction? Induction is when you draw a conclusion from a set of observations. This can be super useful, and it is probably the type of reasoning that you use from day to day. If you see a lake and it's covered with swans, and all of the swans are white, and then you go to a different lake, and you see some more white swans, and then you visit every lake in England and count about 1 trillion swans across them, and every single one of them is white, you can pretty safely assume that all swans are white. You probably do this all the time. Knowing which restaurants will serve you food the quickest, knowing which animals will steal that food once you have it in your hands. You've probably induced that information because humans are amazing at recognizing patterns, and we're oftentimes correct in our assumptions. The big problem with induction though, is that whatever theory you develop is limited in scope. You may have a pretty good idea of what you can observe, but you can't know whether you'll be right in all future situations. And when one day you find a black swan, your theory about all swans being white swans will be debunked entirely. This was a real thing, by the way. Europeans used the phrase black swan to describe something that didn't exist until they found that black swans actually do exist, just not necessarily in Europe. So what the hell does this have to do with YouTube? Well, for the most part, fan theories on YouTube will almost always be developed through induction. That is, making an observation and assigning conclusions. Let's take my Tord is a clone video, because I think it's a pretty good example of what I'm talking about. Through watching Eddsworld, you may notice that Tord looks and acts differently in the end. Tord has been cloned in the past, and some of those clones look and act differently to their original counterparts. Therefore, the Tord that we see in the end may be one of those reject clones. There is nothing wrong with this theory. Actually, it's still one of my favourites, and I think it holds up pretty well under intense scrutiny. But in the realms of fiction, where reality is kept within the borders of the work itself, This theory is simultaneously unprovable and unfalsifiable. I could also argue that because aliens exist in Eddsworld, and those aliens may look entirely different depending on which planet they came from, Tord is an alien from outer space trying to use his big flying robot to get back home. Now you probably think that that theory is much less interesting, and I would 100% agree, but the same logic still applies. I may not be able to convince you that I'm right, but you can't convince me that I'm wrong. There is no black swan. With a lot of internet theories like this, you can poke holes in them, but if you want something to be true, it is surprisingly easy to explain away inconsistencies. If the monster is Tom possessed by a demon, then why is there a blueprint in Tord's lab? Well, maybe the blueprint is modelled after the monster. If the monster comes out when Tom is angry, then why doesn't he come out here? Well, maybe after Power Ed, the spirit flew away and it never came back. You can't prove that I'm wrong, so there is a chance that I'm right. But remember the title of this video. Most theories are wrong, and that's okay. There is a reason that MatPat ends his videos with the phrase, "That's just a theory." If we're talking about real-world scientific issues and important historical events, then yeah, policy based on this kind of reasoning is stupid and dangerous, and science is the way to go, because science seeks to disprove itself. However, when we're talking about movies and cartoons and video games, the more ridiculous the theory, the more fun it is to talk about. You want to hear my favourite film theory? In The Dark Knight, there's this scene with two boats. One boat is filled with prisoners and the other is filled with ordinary civilians. The Joker tells them that they each have a detonator, and by flicking the switch they will blow up the other boat. They have 10 minutes, and if nobody flicks the switch, then both boats will be kaploded. So the passengers have this dilemma where the only way to assure survival is by flicking the switch. So what's the theory? The theory is that the Joker actually gave the passengers the detonators to their own boats. There is absolutely no evidence of this within the film, and without spoiling the ending, the outcome of this dilemma gives no evidence supporting or disproving this theory. What I love about this theory is that it actually opens up discussions about the Joker and his mind and his view on humanity, and it makes the scene even more interesting upon rewatch. When fans propose ideas like Mr. Burns was shot by Abe Simpson, or the companion cube contains a dead body, or Matt is evil because he doesn't like ice cream, they don't necessarily believe it, at least not all the time. Hell, I'd be shocked if anyone on the Eddsworld team spent as much mental energy on Tom's family tree as I have. But these theories are just so fun. And that's what makes art critique of any kind so interesting. In school, you've probably studied a book like A Christmas Carol and had to write about how it's critical of rich people in Victorian England or something. But you can explore so many ideas within so many pieces of media. You can do a post-colonial deconstruction of The Lost World, a gendered analysis of Mad Max Fury Road, a nihilist reading of Deathloop. Whether those themes were in the creator's head when making them is almost irrelevant. They're fun to talk about, kind of educational, and in a lot of cases make you appreciate the work of art even more. That's why we study books and talk about films. Beyond just a piece of escapism, art is the method by which we communicate ideas through beauty and emotion, and by tearing into them and talking about them and making YouTube videos about them, we keep that conversation going. And that is why most internet theories are terrible, and that's okay.